think of it this way, like a violent home invasion. You call the police, and when they arrive, officers take the side of the intruders. You started it, they say, insisting the only peaceful way forward for you and your family is to let the invaders keep the upstairs bedroom. You'd, of course, be shocked. Your neighbors would fear for their own safety. And how long would any semblance of peace in your house or your neighborhood last? Well, today, Donald Trump called Ukraine's President Zelensky, a man who's done nothing but valiantly defend his homeland and his people, a, quote, dictator without elections. An especially insane and rich accusation, given the fact that Trump's administration is right now at the negotiating table not with Ukraine, but with Vladimir Putin, who most recently won a miraculous 88% of the vote in Russia, a figure nearly as high as it is preposterous. Trump's entirely upside down, insipid and backwards analysis that it's Zelensky, an American ally who is somehow a dictator in this story, was a response to an observation President Zelensky made 24 hours ago, that Trump was in a, quote, disinformation bubble by suggesting that Ukraine was responsible for its own invasion. It's another blinking red plot point in the Republican Party's descent from a functional political party, from anything resembling the good parts of what it used to be. A departure from values it claimed to hold dear last week. Watch Republicans praise Zelensky.
Zelensky and the Ukrainians are clearly showing the will to fight. I do believe he's turning out to be a modern-day Winston Churchill.
You're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass.
So what now, Republicans? It's not the first, and it certainly won't be the last time for choosing for Republicans in a second Trump presidency. So we'll pay attention both to what they say and what they do, like this.
Do you agree with President Trump that Zelensky is a dictator?
I would say that.
But make no mistake about it, that invasion was the responsibility of one human being on the face of this planet. It was Vladimir Putin.
To the extent that the White House said that Ukraine started the war, I disagree. I think Vladimir Putin started the war. I also believe, through bitter experience, that Vladimir Putin is a gangster. He's a gangster with a black heart.
Well, I will look at the direct quote, but I certainly would not call President Zelensky a dictator.
That today from the party that jettisoned Liz Cheney from her post in leadership and turned her into a pariah. For her part, Liz Cheney posted this on social media today, quote, Trump, with his devotion to Putin, abandonment of Ukraine, and lies about history, is the antithesis of everything Ronald Reagan stood for. He is aligning America with the enemies of the very freedom that generations have fought and died to defend. History will not be kind to those who are helping him, especially those who call themselves Reagan Republicans, while they pretend not to see what is happening. Siding with America's adversaries over America's allies is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Ambassador Michael McFaul is here, former ambassador to Russia and MSNBC international affairs analyst. Also joining us, New York Times diplomatic correspondent Michael Crowley. And joining us as well, retired four-star general, MSNBC military analyst, General Barry McCaffrey. General McCaffrey, I remember in the days before the invasion, you were looking at open source intelligence of the Russian military sort of lining up on the border of Ukraine. Can you just go back to the most basic fact check of how the war in Ukraine began and who started it?
Well, first of all, I think you have to put it into context that Vladimir Putin is a gangster. He is a murderous dictator. He kills his own internal enemies within eyesight of the Kremlin. He has been involved in mass atrocities in Syria and Chechnya, in Georgia, in the invasion of Crimea, and now the continuing war against the civilian population of Ukraine. There's no question that Vladimir's basic motivation was to recreate the Soviet Empire. Now it's Ukraine. Now it's the 20% he holds of the country. The next step will be the rest of Ukraine, the Baltic states, Poland. The Europeans understand this. So, listening to what's going on in Washington today, it's difficult to process this. It's utter madness. It's against the security of the United States and its allies.
Ambassador McFaul, it's also, as with the beginning of the first term, Trump has a lot of ability and capacity to completely change and shift U.S. foreign policy, but he doesn't get to make up his own set of facts. And what's puzzling is the adherence to the lies told by Putin. Let me just offer this, again, as a public service. These are the lies and these are the facts. Trump posted, Zelensky talked the U.S. into spending $350 billion. The facts, according to NBC News, this is inaccurate. The overall U.S. response to the war in Ukraine has totaled $183 billion from Russia's full-scale invasion through September 30th, 2024. He also said the U.S. has spent $200 billion more than Europe. That, too, is inaccurate. He said the U.S. will get nothing back. That, too, is inaccurate. 70% of Ukraine aid has been spent in the United States or on U.S. forces. What, in your view, explains, and then tell me what the consequences are, for abandoning any factual predicate for this radical anti-sort of ally, anti-U.S. national security pivot?
Well, tragically, President Trump has never had a big commitment to the truth. He's obviously in the bubble. I agree completely with President Zelensky. He's getting his information from this bubble. But it's not about opinions. I'm glad you're emphasizing that. It is a fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. You don't get to have an opinion about that. 2 + 2 = 4. You don't get to have an opinion about that. You don't get to say, I believe that 2 + 2 = 4. It's a fact. Putin invaded. Zelensky also does not have a 4% approval rating. That is a fact. We have data to support that. But why is it important? It's important because it makes our president look like he's not in control of the facts, that he's not capable of leading the United States. It weakens our negotiating partners when he says things like that. It emboldens Putin. And therefore, that it's against American national security interests. And what really troubles me is what you started with, Nicole. Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, he knows that. Secretary of State Rubio, he knows that. I just was at the Munich Security Conference a few days ago. I saw lots of Republicans there. They know it. They need to step up now because this is a dangerous moment in American history, a really dangerous moment. This is not a laughing matter. This could be a pivotal moment where we lose our allies, we lose Ukraine, and then we are weak when we have to take on places like China.
I mean, Michael Crowley, Rubio authored the most devastating and damning indictment of Donald Trump's ties to Russia when he took over as the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Rubio knows that the things Trump is saying aren't true. I think the other thing that's in sharp relief today is the complete impotence of Trump's national security apparatus heads. I don't even know what we call them. What is the sort of reporting coming out of the State Department about Rubio's role in standing by Trump and these lies?
Well, Nicole, I think that, a lot of diplomats and as we saw in the clips you played, even members of Congress and political allies of Rubio are surprised and disappointed, I think, not only in President Trump, but in Rubio himself, who, as you said, was a very outspoken critic of Vladimir Putin. In fact, I've been looking back at his questioning of Rex Tillerson when Tillerson was nominated by Trump to be his first Secretary of State in January of 2017. And Rubio went hard at him in Tillerson's confirmation hearings, pressing Tillerson to go on the record and say that Vladimir Putin was a war criminal. And Tillerson wouldn't do it. He dodged and bobbed and weaved, I think, because Tillerson was in the position Rubio is now in. He knew he was working for a president who wanted who admired Putin and wanted to have a relationship with Putin and wanted to do diplomacy with Putin. And now Rubio is in this position. And what you don't hear when he talks about his meeting with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia to talk about the fate of Ukraine, you don't hear him calling Putin a war criminal. You don't hear him denouncing the Russians for launching an invasion of Ukraine. It's a very different tone. He's essentially on mute in many ways. And I think that that's very disappointing to people who felt for a long time like he was an articulate and particularly sharp and effective critic of Putin and the Russian regime. So, you know, at the same time, we do see the example of people like Tillerson and other people who have worked for Trump who, you know, either sort of change their views, or I think another possibility of what might be happening here, what I think has happened before, is that people think that they can kind of control Trump. So they see things differently, but they say there's no point in publicly disagreeing with the president. I'm not going to get caught up in a gotcha of I used to say this and he says that, but they try to be a guardrail. So one question here is that what Marco Rubio is trying to do? And I would say that that history suggests that the guardrail strategy has not worked very well. It's been a losing game. So if that's what he's trying, you know, you have to say good luck with that.